It's time to pull back the curtains about so-called protections that are supposed to be helping tenants here in the province of British Columbia. In reality, they will only fuel the next wave of unaffordable rents and cause unneeded damage specifically to middle and low income earners who rent. These new regulations sweeping across British Columbia were put in place and effective as of July 18th, 2024, with the promise of making housing more affordable and accessible and fair for renters. However, history tells us a completely different story. So join me as we uncover each detail of these new tenant protections that will for sure pave the way for the next rental crisis that will reduce housing availability and affordability for the most vulnerable in the province as landlords are sent fleeing the market. And if you agree with me by the end of this video that these new tenant protections will cause more problems than they solve, please go ahead and click the like button to help put a stop to the Dark Lord of the Sith that is Emperor David Palpatine Eby. Now, I say that kind of jokingly. In many, many ways, I'm starting to see a resemblance of the dark side reflected in our absolutely crazy socialist premier David Eby. And I think what he's doing is playing on the emotions of the weak or the ones that are most affected by this housing crisis, the renters, playing towards their emotions in order to get immediate satisfaction now, try and look like the good guy, and then just seize more power. I mean, I don't want to lose the audience here because I've been really struggling with how to get this information out to you. And I scripted this whole video and I then immediately threw that script in the garbage because I don't want to come off as somebody that looks, I mean, I am a landlord and I'm seeing how these tenant protections are affecting rents and how they have affected rents. And I don't want that to get lost in the argument. So what I'm going to do here today is not present to you the similarities between how the Dark Lord of the Sith, Emperor Palpatine, came to power and how it resembles the same way that the unelected premier that we have right now came to power and how they play off of the fears of the weak. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to talk any further after this little rant, of course, about how he's created a tension between two sides, played them against each other, just in order to get more power. I'm going to leave that alone. I do think it is the case. I do think his ideas are not good for society, and it will cause much pain in the future, all in the name of safety and security now, just like the Star Wars character. But let's not go there. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through step by step of these changes and discuss them in a much more calm and relaxed manner because I'm a property owner and I get very emotional about my property rights being taken away and given to people that don't own my property. I want to provide safe housing for my tenants. I want that to be a good investment. I do not think my rights to my property should be given to someone who is renting my property. That's just, I'm not going to make any qualms about that. That is my belief. If you believe tenants should have rights over the property that they rent off of someone else, we're probably going to disagree. But what I do know is British Columbia and Ontario have the worst rents in the entire country, and they also have the most tenant protections. But I'm going to get to that a little bit closer to the end. So what has actually changed? What has got me so fired up? Well, this is it. I cut and pasted these. I wanted to make sure that I touch on each one of them. So effective July 18th, which was just recently. So now this is moving forward. Another thing that ticks me off is a couple of weeks ago, I put out a video saying there's no way the government could put out such a ludicrous idea as what they did here, but they did just 2 weeks, 3 weeks later. So now this is what they proposed. When you saw all of the news press conferences come out when this was proposed, they only spoke and focused on this mandatory use of this new portal, which is supposed to streamline the eviction process. It doesn't. It actually just keeps tenants, gives them the ability to fight longer, but that's fine. Let's not talk about that yet. What it was touted as this whole thing that's going to streamline the process, make it easier for everyone. So that was the big announcement. And then the actual damage was just a little blurb down below. Now, just maybe I should hop back out of this here real quick, just because I have something to say about this. Now, People that have followed the podcast channel, the Tom Story Show, you very much know that we have had the housing minister on. I disagree with a lot of his policies, but he's a smart guy and he totally understands what's going on. One thing I'm going to point out, maybe I missed it. Maybe there was such a thing, but I scrolled back through Minister Ravi Kalan's Instagram just today to do some research on this. I looked everywhere. I didn't see. There was no press conference. My personal thought is this bit about the damage that's being done, I think he is smart enough to know, in the discussions I've had with him, he is smart enough to know this will cause damage. And that's why I don't believe he held a press conference about this. Could be summer vacation. I could be wrong. But I think he understands that we're kicking landlords out of the game right now. And this idea that's been implemented was not his, because he's a smart guy. David Eby, also a smart guy, but in my estimation, sinister. So I think this came from the top. That's my conspiracy theory. Let's get back. I know I'm going to lose a lot of the people that disagree with me, so I'm trying best not to do that. I just want to cover the topics and not look like an absolute crazy person, which I'm probably doing already. So landlords must now use this new web portal. Okay, so we have to use this web portal. We can no longer deliver notice to the tenant in writing. Now, this is unclear at this point to me whether or not we also have to do it in writing, or whether or not this web portal is considered to be the only thing we have to do. What if the tenant says they don't get the email? All these different things, but we basically now have to register with the government if we're evicting someone for our own use. We can't evict someone in BC. We never have, well, not for a long time. We haven't been able to evict someone just to get a new tenant in. We can only do it for our own use, which means myself, my wife, my kids, my parents, or in this case, some sort of caretaker, whatever that is. That's what personal use is. That's it. I can't evict for any other reason. So now I have to go onto this portal. I have to register with the government my eviction. I guess on its face, maybe not a terrible thing. I personally don't want the government more in my business. I want them less in my business, and they want to have upstanding citizens that follow the rules through eviction. But this is the nanny state that we are living in. Landlords using the web portal, will be required to have basic BC EID to access the site. I have no idea what that is. I'm sure I will find out because I'm a landlord. But at the same time, do you know how many landlords are? I have a client right now, little old lady, barely uses a computer. Now she's going to have to figure out how to do this BC EID thing. She can't just go. She's got a great relationship with her tenants, but she can't just go to the tenant and provide them a piece of paper. She has to register this for it to be legal somehow. I think this is going to cause more problems than it absolutely fixes. The portal will require landlords to prove details about the persons moving into the home. The details of the new occupant of the home will be shared with the tenant. Let me go back into my crazy get out of my life government speech here. I know anybody that votes for David Eby, that votes for the federal Liberal Party, the federal NDP party is not going to agree with me. The government is not here to help us. The government is now, this, in my estimation, is almost like forgive me for using this analogy. In the Soviet Union, your whole idea was to report on each other, right? You report somebody's doing something wrong with the government. North Korea still does it the same way. This person's doing something wrong. They all keep an eye on each other. Well, now the details of the occupant will be shared with the tenant. Okay? So why is this a big deal? Steve, you're making a big deal out of nothing. Cool. What if, and this is a very common situation we see. What if I bought an investment property near a university and the plan was I have 2 kids that are going to go to that university one day, and now I'm evicting the tenant because my kids are going to go spend 4 years at that condo. I have every right to do that. It's my property. Now I have to share with my previous tenant, who may be mad, my 2 daughters' phone numbers, contact information. I don't know what else is on this form yet. I haven't used it yet. But now everybody gets to know who the new tenant is which is a family member of mine. And in my estimation, the privacy concerns here are way too great. The government needs to step out. But our society has now decided that privacy means zero. And the only thing that matters is that we save the tenants, because the tenants are the weak and they can't save themselves, apparently. I'm not saying that about tenants. I'm saying that's what the government thinks about you. While using the web portal, landlords will be given information about the required conditions. So for instance, so this is a bit of I don't know if this is a scare tactic or if this is saying we want you landlords to better understand your evictions. I do think there are a lot of landlords out there that don't understand that they can't just evict a tenant, and so they do. There are bad faith, for sure, bad faith evictions out there. There are. So this is a bit of a, hey, by the way, if you're doing this in bad faith, I'm going to make you sign the check boxes and say, yes, I understand this is good. That is whatever's going on. These are the penalties. Okay. I mean, they should know what the penalties are. Many of them don't. I guess I can get on board with that. They will also be informed about the amount of compensation. This is a big change. The compensation now is actually getting crazy. If you do bad faith evict someone, well, you're gonna find out more about that as we go down here. But basically, it's another kind of scare tactic. Hey, you're doing this incorrectly. Here's how much we're gonna smash you with. And by the way, spoiler alert for later on, it's now 12 months rent. We're gonna smash you with 12 months rent. 12 months rent right now might be $50,000, might be $40,000. We're going to smash you with that, and you're going to owe it to your tenant because your tenant has more rights over your property than you do. Now let's get to the really, the bad part. Let's get to the really, really bad part. Extending the notice period. Now, this is done out of compassion. Darth Vader turned to the dark side out of compassion. He wanted to learn how to save his wife from dying. I understand it's crazy. I understand it. Compassion doesn't make sense, as opposed to the Jedi, who understand that self-sacrifice and doing the hard thing and not giving into your emotions in the moment is what actually brings you happiness in the future. But that's, again, I don't want to get too crazy about this. 2 months notice is changing to a 4-month notice on July 18th, 2024. Let's step out on this one, because this is the main damage that's being done. And here's why I want to tell you it's so damaging. It's so damaging. It's terrible. If I want to move into that property, sure. Let's say I'm renting somewhere in Toronto. I want to move back to Surrey. I can give that 4 months notice. I can try and figure that out. But if I give notice, let's say I'm recording this, it's near the end of July. If I give notice by July 31st, I don't get access to that property till December 1st. Nobody feels bad for me. You as tenants don't feel bad for me. Other landlords don't feel bad for me. It's fine. But let's talk about the realities of how this is actually going to work. Let's say, for instance, I'm a downsizer. Let's say I'm selling my property today, my 4,000 square foot house. I'm an empty nester. I sell that house. My retirement plan is to live off of that equity and then move into my condo. There is no way in heck I'm going to get a buyer by July 31st. It could change, but let's say it's July 31st to want to move in on December 1st. Before, it was already October 1st. So if I gave my notice on the 31st, they had all of August, all of September to find a new place, and then October 1st I could move in, I could complete on the sale. Now I have to wait for a buyer that is willing to buy in summer and move in the dead of winter. That's how long this period is going to be. And if it rolls over to to August 1st, that now rolls you into January 1st. You could have someone buying a property on August 1st and not be able to get into the property until the next year, 6 months later, 5 months later, let's call it. That's how it works. This is not 120 days. It's 120 days clear. That means from the first of the month. Here is the issue. Here's probably the biggest issue. This makes tenanted properties unsaleable. unsaleable. Here's why. I'm looking at a 1-bedroom condo or a 2-bedroom condo, let's say. It's currently tenanted. Before, again, let's use July 31st as our number. Before July 31st, we firm up. The tenant or the current owner gives notice. They have to be out by October 1st. I complete on October 1st, move in October 1st, October 2nd, something like that. Let's say that's what we do. I secure my financing. I do inspection. Everybody's happy. The tenant already gets 1 month free rent, by the way. The tenant gets September for free. But that's not enough time, apparently, for them to find a new accommodation. So now it's December 1st. But if I'm a buyer that firms up my purchase on July 31st, let's say, I cannot secure financing for more than 120 days. I actually have to sign off on a property not knowing if the interest rate I'm getting is going to be okay. I actually have to requalify while I'm already signed off on a property, opening up massive risk to me as the buyer. Therefore, as a buyer, I am not going to offer on tenanted properties at all. Landlords are selling their properties right now because a lot of them are cash flowing negative. They're hurting. Prices are coming down. And now there's no option for them to get out. Now the tenants are going to say, good, screw you. Guess what? Let's make it unsaleable. Let's make them not make their payments. Let's see what happens when the court order comes in, because all this stuff isn't affected by court orders. As soon as the judge says there's a foreclosure, guess what, tenant? You're out in 12 days. Not a good thing. But I'm going to come back to the downside of this part closer to the end of the video. And this is probably going to be long, but this is a big topic that we have to discuss. Tenants will now have 30 days to dispute the notice instead of the current 15. If you get a notice on, let's call it August 15th, to get evicted for November 1st, which was November 1st. Now it's, by the way, January 1st. 15 days should be plenty of time to get your crap together to figure out how to dispute it if you think it's being done wrong. What is the extra 15 days going to do? Absolutely nothing except frustrate more transactions. It's stupid. It's basically saying, David Eby is saying, you as the tenant are not smart enough to figure out how to get your crap in order in 15 days if you figure you're getting screwed by your landlord. It's absolutely stupid. But we live in a nanny state now. Then let's go on to this bit. The individual moving into the property must occupy it for at least 12 months. Previously, it was 6 months. So sometimes you would have a tenant that would be evicted so the owner could move in, but the owner's in between places. They own a property. They have the right to move in. Now they have to live there for at least 12 months. I mean, it was I don't want to say trick because everybody that disagrees with me is going to get angry at me. But it was a trick to say, hey, listen, you know what? I have this other property. I'm living in this condo, but you're such a bad tenant that I can't get you out any other way other than to move into the property myself. Now I have to move in for 12 months instead of 6 months. So I have to inconvenience my life for a year because you weren't paying your rent, because you were so bad I couldn't get you out otherwise. You were damaging the property, whatever it is. Landlords found to be ending a tenancy in bad faith could be ordered to pay the displaced tenant, your old tenant, 12 months rent. Now, should penalties for bad actors be big? Yes, I agree. I don't actually hate increased penalties for bad actors. I don't think it's actually going to be invoked because I don't know how you're going to get that money. I don't know how it's all going to go down. I'm a big fan of big penalties. I just don't think that, no, you know what? I'm going to say this one's okay. I'm a big fan of hammering down on people that do things incorrectly. Now, there's a couple more notes here that I found on a different website. Actually, it may have come through a different email. There's a couple of folks, there are other changes even further to these ones. For instance, if now I have a basement suite in my home and I have decided that my tenant doesn't pay enough, or I have decided that I want to change the business structure because now, for instance, all the Airbnbs are shut down in BC. What if I can make double the money now as an Airbnb in my basement because I can evict the tenant? They've actually gone so far as to change the rules about what you are allowed to do with the property. Should you evict a tenant, you have to move in, or your family member has to move in. You're not allowed to run a business out of that. Personal use could be personal use, not anymore. You have to occupy the unit yourself. If you wanted to change my basement suite from a long-term rental to a short-term rental so I can double my money, I'm not allowed that option anymore because I'm a big bad landlord. I can't evict for short-term tenancies. I'm not allowed to evict for any other personal use. For instance, they said storage. If somebody owns a condo, they want to leave it vacant, pay the speculation tax, they don't have that option anymore. So now let's talk about the actual downside of this. This is going to make sales plummet on tenanted properties. That's going to bring prices down. You're going to think that's what I think is the bad thing. It's not. It's not. You're going to see tenanted properties, specifically condos. I think you're going to see those prices drop now because you don't have as many people with the ability to get in and purchase those properties. Eventually, they will drop so far that some renters will be able to purchase those properties. They'll be willing to take the risk of the 120 days. Maybe a bank will come out and start securing loans at a different length of time. And some of those tenants will be able to move into those properties. They'll be able to finally afford lower price properties. I don't think the property prices coming down is actually the issue. But no matter what you think of where tenancy and home ownership and all that stuff is, it's always somewhere about 2/3 of the people own and 1/3 of the population rents. So let's say we can go from, 66% ownership, and that's dropped now. It actually has dropped. Let's say we get back up to 69% ownership. So another 2 or 3% of the tenants, not the tenants, sorry, I guess, of the population that were tenants would be able to now get into housing. But what it's going to do is it's going to reduce the incentive for landlords to own properties because their property rights are being taken away. Personally, I'm considering selling my condo over this rule the next time the tenant leaves. It's probably easier just to sell it and not have someone else have more rights over my property. So that will reduce landlords. Rent control has already reduced the amount of landlords that are interested in coming into the property, that are interested in buying, or into the province, that are interested in buying pre-sales. Rent control is keeping out companies even from buying rentals. Rent control is a problem. This is another protection that is going to scare and drive landlords. BC has declared war on landlords, saying, we don't want you to make money. Cool. Well, guess what? Then they pack up their money, they go elsewhere, and you're left with, sure, lower house prices, probably, but now you're also left with fewer and fewer landlords. And when we have fewer and fewer rental properties, that bottom third, let's even call it 25%, even 20%. Let's say 1/3 of renters get to buy. Great. We've now got 20% of the overall population that is going to see massive increase in rents, because we're funneling, again, another 1 million people per year into this country, and we're not funneling in home purchasers. We're funneling in the majority low-income earners who are there to fill the jobs that traditional, Canadians that have lived here now won't do to prop up our economy. Massive, massive damage in the future. Rents are going to skyrocket because landlords are going to take their ball and go home and say, I'm not living in this communist, socialist ruled province.